Parkinson's is a condition that has been known about since ancient times. In Western medical literature, it was described by the physician Galen as shaking palsy in 175 AD. However, it was not until 1817 that a detailed medical essay was published on the subject by London doctor James Parkinson. It is understood that dopamine deficiency in the brain is the root matter, yet why this initially occurs is less clear. It was in the 1960s that the chemical indifferences in the brain of Parkinson's patients were identified. So, what exactly is Parkinson's? Parkinson's is a chronic progressive movement disorder that affects muscle control and balance. It is a neurodegenerative disease due to progressive loss of dopamine neurons in the brain. Dopaminergic neurons are primarily responsible for smooth control of voluntary muscle movement. They are found in the substantia nigra portion of the brain, which sits on top of the spinal cord within the midbrain. With the decreased presence of dopamine neurotransmitters, Parkinson's patients begin to experience four main types of primary motor impairments.
The initial three symptoms are arresting tremor, bradykinesia, and rigidity. Arresting tremor occurs when the patient's muscles are relaxed and usually stops when the movement begins. It is brought on by increased stress or excitement and can make it difficult to perform primary motor functions. Bradykinesia is defined as a slow movement or the general reduction of spontaneous movement. It makes it difficult for patients to perform repetitive movements and limits their range. Others can usually identify these symptoms when patients are trying to perform tasks such as buttoning a shirt, cutting food, or brushing teeth. In addition, it slows and softens speech. Rigidity is the stiffness and inflexibility of the limbs, neck, and trunk. It can be very painful and continues to decrease patients' range of motion. Through the progression of the disease is when there is an onset of the fourth primary motor dysfunction of postural instability. Patients have difficulty standing upright and experience constant swaying. This leads to constant loss of balance and feelings of instability on your feet. Some secondary motor symptoms that occur due to the loss of dopamine is freezing of gait, shrinkage of handwriting, loss in facial movements and expressions, or unwanted accelerations in speech or gait. In addition, non-motor impairments include loss of sense of smell, constipation, REM behavior disorder, mood disorder, orthostatic hypotension, which is low blood pressure when standing, sleep disturbances, bladder problems, sexual problems, saliva, weight loss or gain, fatigue, skin problems, and cognitive issues.
So into the neuroscience background of what exactly is going on in the brains of these patients. First, we must discuss the basal ganglia, which is the cluster of neurons that is responsible for two different pathways, a direct pathway and an indirect pathway. The direct pathway is in control of our voluntary movements, such as picking up a cup of coffee. The indirect pathways is responsible for keeping our muscles at a resting state when we do not want them to move. The dopamine neurons that are located in the substantia nigra travel to the striatum through the nigrostriatal pathways. As these neurons begin to die off in people with Parkinson's disease, we begin to see the production of Lewy body proteins with these clusters of neurons. The role of these proteins play into the disease still goes unknown. So how does this relate? The direct pathways excite the thalamus, in turn exciting the motor cortex, allowing for accelerated movements. Without the release of neurons from the substantia nigra to the striatum, the thalamus cannot be excited and patients cannot perform tasks at the required speed. On the contrary, without the release of dopamine, your brain cannot reduce the control of excess reduction of the indirect pathways, leading to constantly lowering ability in motor movements.
A chemical known as dopamine is released from an area of the brain called the substantia nigra. This neurotransmitter is released by neurons onto adjacent cells and into a synapse, sending a signal that enables smooth, coordinated muscle movement. In Parkinson's disease, dopamine release by the substantia nigra is diminished. In response, the adjacent areas of the thalamus and globus pallidus interna become overactive, creating a resultant tremor.
The causes of Parkinson's disease still go unknown, but in minimal cases, family history may increase your chances. Males are more likely to develop the disorder when compared to females, and aging also plays a role. Otherwise, there have shown to be some signs of genetic and environmental risk factors, but none are significant enough to repost yet. Since the causes are still not well understood, the question of preventing Parkinson's cannot be fully answered. Although some studies do show that caffeine, green tea, and regular aerobic exercise may reduce the risk of Parkinson's.